everybody. Long time no see. Long time no upload.
That's true. March was, we'll call it a wash.
March was a very difficult month, mostly for me. Had a bad turn with my mental health, and then the month ended with my Lola dying, which, yeah, not great. Not great.
But we're recovering, which is always good news. The family is too, and that's the important thing. So for now, possibilities abound.
Yeah, so this video is for our possibility pile, which is basically like a TBR, except that we're only saying we might possibly get to.
Yeah, otherwise it's live.
I feel like there's less pressure on me once we say something is on the possibility.
Yeah, I could possibly read the following things.
I could also possibly not read them. So, you know.
All right.
Anyway, it's a fun way to highlight some books.
True.
And that's really all that is.
And without further ado.
Okay, I'm going to start. The first book that this is the one of all the things on my list that I'm very sure that I'm going to read because I'm actually reading it with my friend Rachel. It's part of like the paranormal thing that we do around Halloween time. Right. Yeah, so I'm going to read the sequel, the second book in the Night Hunter series. The title is One Foot in the Grave.
Right.
And I'm not going to really tell you what the synopsis is because spoilers, but the first book is about a half-human, half-vampire named Kat, and she is determined to find her vampire father and, you know, kind of get back at him. Instead, she ends up crossing paths with a vampire who is also a bounty hunter named Bones, and they sort of get involved both in the romantic sense and also in the sense of that there are a lot of shenanigans surrounding them.
Fair.
And I'm really looking forward to continuing the series. A lot of people have said, and I do think this is true, that this sort of mirrors the relationship that Buffy has with Spike. Kind of. It's kind of that dynamic, which I loved. So, you know, it's been fun. So it's hilarious. It is also super compelling, and I like the world and the way that Janine Frost tells her story. So I'm very excited to get to that sequel. Awesome.
My first one is going to have to be Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Ready Player 2 is the sequel to Ready Player 1. For those of you who don't know, Ready Player 1 was a pretty groundbreaking book, I want to say. The movie came out, it was great too, and it's a post-dystopian kind of world where everybody lives for being online via the Oasis, which is sort of like replaced the internet. The internet is barely mentioned, maybe, or if it is, whatever. Point is, all of it is in the Oasis right now, and the creator of the Oasis left an Easter egg, well actually a bunch of Easter eggs, so that if any players could find said Easter eggs and crack the code, they would effectively own controlling interest in sort of like the you know, the Oasis, which is like,
to get it is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so it's just like, you know, it's just like if somebody owned the entire internet and said, hey, if you find these clues and break them, you could own the internet and basically control, you know, the economy basically, and you'd be the richest person sort of like in the US.
That's intense.
So Ready Player 2 happens after the events of the first book, where there were a bunch of people who did go for all of the Easter eggs. Spoilers as to whether they were successful or not, but Ready Player 2 happens to be set sort of like in that post, okay, now that you've taken your shot, what will the world therefore now be? Whether
very neat or not. Sidestep there.
It's a very neat sidestep, I like to say. Twitter has been funny, as always, but in this case, funny in a good way about you know, all of the Ready Player 2 stuff. So just go to Twitter, Google like Ready Player 2 and you'll find it. For now, I am interested because the first one made such a huge impact on me, and I cannot wait to read the second one.
So my next book is actually also another book that I'm reading with Rachel, so this likely will also actually get read, and we are reading it together for our Friends with Arcs feature. It's a book called People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It's about two characters, Poppy and Alex. They're childhood friends, and they have this yearly tradition of going on a week-long summer vacation together. Except that 2 years ago, they went on this vacation, something happened, and it's been kind of like weird between them since. And so when Poppy kind of finds herself in a crisis and reflects on the last moment she felt truly happy and realizes it was on that trip, she's determined to convince her best friend that they need to go on another trip together. And I'm so excited to read this because I loved Emily Henry's adult debut contemporary romance novel last year, Beach Read, in case you forgot. So I'm very much looking forward to reading another book from her.
My next book is going to be Winter Keep. Winter Keep is book 4, I want to say, of the Graceling saga, if that makes complete sense.
Book 4 companion novel.
Book 4 companion novel. 4th book in the universe, I guess.
Yes,
because
I think that's the better way.
Because, okay, what's interesting is when Kristen Kishore did Graceling, it was like, it was just such a huge sort of like deal it's medieval YA fantasy. You've got a young girl who has the you know, everybody in this world have something called graces, right? Where they're able to sort of like do some crazy abilities and whatever. And this young girl, her grace is death, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. And she was the best one at it, and she was great, and it was about her story, and it was lovely. I thought the next book would be about her or the events afterwards. Not so much. It was a prequel. Bitter Blue, book 3, was actually sort of the events after Gracie, but way after, like just so much so, and it was about a little girl named Bitter Blue. And then of course now finally we have the next installment, Winter Keep. Now, have I read Bitter Blue? We'll find out. And by we, I mean you, because I don't want to lie on camera any more than I already have. And so,
and by lie, he simply means he's talking about TBRs.
I didn't read anything. My God, I did not read anything at all. Anyway, so
otherwise, this is 100% him.
Yeah, this is 100% me. So it'd be interesting to see what Kristen Cashore can mine out of this world. I want to say I do miss Katza a lot, the main character from Graceling, but it does not in any. And Alexa loved Fire.
I did. I
so
really liked
so it
Fire.
Does not in any way mean that
I have not read Bitter Blue. I will not lie about that.
That is true, but it does not mean that you know the world isn't rich enough that you couldn't have mined like 4 or 5 more books.
Oh
like,
yeah, I could totally say that.
So that's just
you could
how
probably even write more.
Lush the series is. Anyway, so that's my second.
The next book that I'm going to mention is our pick for our book club, the family book club that I do with my sisters and cousin. The book is my choice, and that was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. It was my turn to pick, and this is the one we all ended up agreeing on. So I'll just read this to you because it's easier than me describing it. So it says, a magical island, a dangerous task, a burning secret. Linus Baker leads a quiet, solitary life. As a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, he spends his days overseeing the well-being of children in government-sanctioned orphanages. So he's unexpectedly summoned to go to an island orphanage, basically the one on the Cerulean Sea, and to check on the 6 children who live there because they all happen to be pretty dangerous individuals. But then he meets their caretaker and things kind of happen there, and I've heard nothing but praise for this book. Like, I feel like everyone I know who I'm friends with who has read it absolutely loved it, and I think I could use something like wholesome and heartwarming at this particular time, so I'm really excited to get to The House in the Cerulean Sea.
That's really cool. I like that one. All right, speaking of houses and people in orphanages, I plan to read Map of Days by Ransom Riggs. It is book 4 in the Miss Peregrine's series. It's one of those, I want to say, set in a pretty dystopian-esque middle American 20s, 30s, you know, kind of like settings where, you know, like it almost harkens back to the old Carnival or Carnival days.
Oh, yes, yes.
Not like Brazil Carnival, just like I was thinking Carnival, the series, like from ages ago, where you've got, you know, like your circus performers, and they've got the aberrations and all this kind of crazy stuff. Very sideshow, very come look at the freaks, right? Which is the opening theme to sideshow. But this time it's focuses on an orphanage where these children are sort of kept. First 3 was a rollicking sort of adventure. The movie did the best that it could, I find. I
forgot there was a movie.
Yeah, there was a movie. It was. I liked it as somebody who was a fan of the books. I absolutely do, and it just ends. Like the 3rd book ends sort of like in a place where you're like, wow, apparently we're going there. So for Map of Days to continue on with another sort of like trilogy on its own, I'm expecting some pretty big stuff, because you can't go back to like the simpler days of we're just like crazy kids with like there's a little girl who eats fried chicken through the back of her head. I mean, you can't go back to those, you know, quirky little days anymore, because the threat has unveiled itself.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do we live now that they're sort of like destroying our way of life, you know, as you know, all of the hidden little houses, and Miss Peregrine's being one of them. So I think Eva Green did a lovely job as Miss Peregrine.
I totally forgot that she played Miss Peregrine.
It was, I liked it. Again, that might be an unpopular opinion. I'm not on Twitter. I don't know how many people hated on it, but I enjoyed it, so.
Okay, the next book I'm going to mention is Time of Our Lives, which is by Emily Wibberley and Austin Cedrin Broca. Has this cover. I've had it for like a year and I haven't read it, which is part of the reason I picked it. It's about 2 teens, and they are basically going on college tours. They have very different ideas of what they want for college. I believe Fitz is the boy, and he doesn't really want to go too far from home because his mother is sick and he would like to be nearer to her. And then Juniper, on the other hand, she's like, I am ready to leave and to be as far away from my family as possible, because she has a pretty big family. And then their paths cross and things kind of happen. I've heard kind of mixed things about this particular book by these authors, but I'm still looking forward to reading it just because I've enjoyed their stories and their writing in the past.
My 4th one is going to be Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas.
Oh, now, finally.
I've actually already started it. I have 2 Sarah books that I have started that I have not not finishing. I'm finishing them. It is the second book in the Throne of Glass series.
Crown of Midnight.
Crown of Midnight. Thank you very much. I was going to ask you what that was. Actually, there are a lot of things I want to ask you. What was that? It's really picking up where I sort of left off. Any Westfall fans? Anyway, but Crescent City, I have started out reading it as well and enjoyed it. That's the thing about Sarah's books. I enjoy them, and then life sort of catches up, and I'm just like, so now I'm just like, let's see, possibly in April, happy birthday to me, I'm gonna actually finish a Sarah J. Maas book.
It's his birthday, but I'm getting the present.
Again. So and since I don't really celebrate, we're fine to give you that present of me finishing yet another Sarah book. So
that would be an amazing present.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Okay, so this book is probably the most ambitious thing that I have on my possibility pile. I will try at least
much
start
ambition.
it. I'm pretty sure it's 1,000 pages long.
Mm.
Yes, it's
it's
literally close to 1,000 pages long. The book is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And this is the first in the Stormlight Archives series. I've heard nothing but good things about this. And the funnier thing is that I don't actually know specific details about it. I know it's set in the same universe as the Mistborn trilogy.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it's all in part of the same universe, basically. And I've heard that this series is incredible. It's another one of those chunky books that I'm gonna have to dedicate some time to, but everyone who's read it really likes the characters,
right?
Which I think is always something that I also really want out of especially my high adult epic fantasy reads. I want to love the characters, because if I'm gonna be stuck with you for 1,000 pages, you have to be someone I at least like. So I am cautiously optimistic that I will like this as much as everyone else. We're gonna see if that's true. But yeah, I can't wait to read another Sanderson book. This will be the 4th, because I've only ever read the first trilogy of Mistborn, and I look forward to reading more. Can't believe I decided to start with a 900+ page book, but why not be ambitious?
Brandon we all know what your name really is, Mr. Smedry. Anyway, I'm an Alcatraz fan.
The last book that we're going to talk about in this video is actually the same for both of us.
That is true.
And it is on this particular possibility pile because it literally came out
yesterday
on the 30th of March. So we haven't gotten to it yet, but we definitely want to, especially because the Shadow and Bone show is coming out. So the book is Rule of Wolves. This is the second book in the King of Scars duology by Leigh Bardugo. King of Scars, if you have not read anything in the Grishaverse, just this summary for King of Scars will definitely be a spoiler.
Extremely spoilery. So let's dial it back.
Yes.
The Grishaverse is set in sort of I want to say a country called Ravka, right? They have something very unique to their population called Grisha. They are people with special abilities. Mm-hmm. A civil war had recently brewed in the Ravkan sort of area. Yeah. The Grisha sort of had their own little reckoning and a real moment where they're like, well, are we going to take control of this country? Are we not going to take control? What do? There's a terrible sort of evil rift of evil energy, or kind of a darkness, kind of
called the Fold. Yes.
Called the Fold, that has also been sort of like a point of contention. All of those things come to a head at the end of the first trilogy. And
King of Scars basically tackles the fallout of whatever occurs at the end of that trilogy.
And actually occurs timeline-wise after the other two books.
The duology as well, Six of Crows.
Six of Crows,
which is about a gang of individuals, 6 to be precise, and they come together for a heist opportunity, only to discover that there's a lot more going on than they anticipated.
And
they
kind of
get involved in all of these things.
Yeah, so they're they live
on a tiny island off the coast of Ravka, basically.
There you go. And for those of you who watched the Vampire Diaries, there was the Vampire Diaries and there was the spin-off. This is the spin-off. So
basically,
but
King of Scars follows characters that are in the first trilogy and also in Six of Crows. It follows Nikolai, who you may recognize from the first trilogy. He's a prince of Ravka. Anyway, we're just gonna leave it at that. He's a prince of Ravka.
He's a prince of Ravka.
And then we have Zoya, who is one of the Grisha mentioned in the Shadow and Bone,
Grisha because of her
trilogy.
Because she's strong. She's very powerful.
Yes, she's a leader actually among the Grisha. And then we have Nina, who was part of the crew in the Six of Crows duology. And their storylines sort of come to.
There's a convergence factor
Yes.
that sort of comes on in. So
I just want to see the fallout in Rule of Wolves so badly.
Exactly. And if there's anything that keeps bringing us back to the Leigh Bardugo sort of like world, and even, you know, the Sarah J. Maas, the way she writes her stuff, if I can mention Crescent City again for a brief minute, there's something about these memorable characters who are very gray. And
I love a good
and they don't always make the greatest decisions. Because they're not, because they're the most human they could ever possibly be, and that to us is, well, it's
fun.
a lovely,
it's a fun thing to explore.
It's just because it's lovely, because every time somebody does something right, then they're on the road to redemption. Every time they do something terrible, well, you know what? Now they're gonna have to get on the road to redemption, and those stories are always fun for myself. And,
so yeah, Rule of Wolves. We're hoping to tackle that in April as well.
Alrighty.
Those are the options on our possibility piles. We'll see how far we get on all of them. You let us know what you are planning to read for April. We would love to hear it, and we'd love to hear what you guys have been reading or up to lately, since we've been a little absent.
Between us.
Anyway, if you want to find us on all our other social media, that's always linked down below. The Goodreads, Instagram, whatever, all the other accounts are down below.
And speaking of social media, our Chain of Iron podcast is out, so if you guys want to check that out. Hope if you've got an hour, 2 hour, an hour and a half, you know, you should be in good shape. Like if you like spoilers, specifically around Shadowhunters. If you like
we're considering doing the same thing for Rule of Wolves, actually, so that is something to look forward to.
A lot of bookish breakdowns coming in 2021.
Anyway, we'll see you guys with another video next week.
Bye.